Now let us continue the new topic, time of supply. In the last lecture, we have covered the topic tax invoice. In that tax invoice, what we have learned is that what is the last date by which invoice has to be issued as per the provisions of the law. That means delay is not allowed. As per the law, delay is not allowed. Actually, it's not necessary that everyone will follow the law. In spite of section 31, it is possible that the invoice is issued after the last day also, but in that case, penalty prosecutions are applicable. But legally, section 31 gives me the date by which invoice has to be issued. Now, since I know that when invoice has to be issued, now I want to know when liability to pay tax arises. On daily basis, you cannot pay the tax. There may be 100 or 1000 sale transaction happening daily in Big Bazaar, Reliance, Easy Day, etc. etc. There may be 100 or 1000 transactions of supply happening daily. Can you expect the supplier to deposit the tax on daily basis with the government? Answer is no. It's almost impossible. A supplier cannot be asked to pay the tax daily. Under Income Tax Act also, the return of income has to be filed on yearly basis. Then it needs to be checked that how much is the tax liability. Under GST also, there are monthly options of furnishing the returns. So time of supply is the topic which will help me in telling when the supplier has become liable to pay tax. Until and unless legally the supplier has become liable to pay tax, government cannot take action against the supplier for not paying the tax, because you have to tell when as a supplier a person is liable to deposit the tax with the government of India. So time of supply helps in this situation. Place of supply helped me in telling me the state where the revenue of 50% GST will go. Time of supply will tell me the point in time when liability to pay tax arises. Time of supply tells me the point in time when liability to pay tax arises. Because when any transaction goes on, there may be different events happening and there may be different dates. Why I am saying so? You take an example. Suppose you want to order a television for your home, and the composition which you want to order is not available with the shopkeeper today. If today you went to the shopkeeper shop, the television set which you liked was not available. So what you did, you gave order that please keep one television set of this much quality and company with you. So today you gave the order. On 5th April 21, you gave the order. After 1 week, you gave some advance also. After 1 week, you gave some advance. Maybe on 13th May, you gave some. On 13th April 2021, you gave some advance. Now for the same event, 2 dates have already come. One ordering date, another giving advance date. On 20th April, for example, television set was received at the shopkeeper's shop. So 3 dates are happening for single event. Single television which should be supplied to me by the shopkeeper, already 3 dates have come. Ordering date, advance date, and order received date at the shopkeeper's shop. But I want to get it dispatched at some address, and for which 3 days will be taken in the transport. So goods receiving date, for example, is 23rd April 21, and then the supply is complete. Now you can imagine 4 different dates are happening for the single transaction of supply. Just a television set was to be purchased, where ordering date is different, payment date is different, goods received at the shopkeeper's shop is different, and the date of receiving that at my home is different. Now in reality the question arises, Out of these four dates, on which date government can say that the supplier has become liable to pay the tax? Can you say that the supplier is liable to pay the tax when order is received? Can you say that the supplier is liable to pay the tax when payment is received by him, or when goods are received at his shop, or when the goods are received finally by the buyer at his home? In reality, the question can arise in my mind on which date the government should make supplier liable. It's not an easy question to answer. It requires the provisions. Now, in reality, all these four things happen in most of the cases at single point of time. That is why we cannot imagine this. If today I want to buy a television and if that is available at any shopkeeper's shop, then today will become the ordering date, today becomes the payment date, today becomes the date when you can receive the product. So all the things are happening on the single day. So there is no question arises. That is why we normally don't imagine that yes, these dates can be different also in reality. And yes, these are different in so many cases also. So when the dates are different, then we have to take the help of time of supply. It tells you the exact date on which as a supplier you have become liable to pay the tax. But it doesn't mean that you should pay the tax on the same day. You will be given some timings like 10 days after the end of the month, 15 days after the end of the month, 20 days after the end of the month. So you'll be given some due dates by which you should make the payment. But at least time of supply has told me on which date I have become liable to pay the tax. Is the concept of time of supply clear? Please raise your hand. Have you understood that what we are going to discuss? We will check, we will determine the date, exact date on which as a supplier I become liable to pay the tax. Now, three sections deal with this provision. Section 12, 13 and 14 of the GST Act. So let me share with you my notepad and then let us see what we will do now. So what is the purpose of time of supply? What help it will do? Time of supply. It tells you the point in time, exact point in time when the liability to pay tax arises. When I say liable, liable means liability to the government. When liability to pay tax is arising. So this date will tell me when the person concerned, whether the supplier or the recipient, because there are so many cases of reverse charge mechanism also where recipient is liable. So I am not writing when the supplier is liable. Whosoever is the concerned person, whose obligation is this to pay the tax to the government, that person's exact point will be determined under time of supply. So there are three sections. This topic is in CGST Act. So section 12, 13 and 14. Section 12 deals with supply of goods. In case of supply of goods, the point of time will be determined with the help of section 12. In case of supply of services, the point in time will be determined with the help of section 13. And so many times there can be change in rates. In the same example which I have assumed, there are different dates. Ordering date was different. Payment receiving date was different. Order dispatched date is different. In the transport, some time will be taken. For example, order received by the buyer is different. There can be different rates. It is possible that till this date the tax rate was 12% on this product, and after this date the tax rate because of notification has become 18%. Now In this case, what is happening is change in rate is happening. Then, in that case, you cannot apply section 12 and 13. We have special section, section 14, change in rate of GST. Now it is whether for goods or for services. So if there is no change in the tax rates of that product, I will apply 12 or 13 depending upon the case. And if there is a change in the GST rate, I cannot apply 12 and 13. I have to apply section number 14. I hope the concept is clear till this point. Now let me start discussing with you my first section 12. So section 12 is the first discussion with you, and I will say that determining the time of supply in case of supply of goods. So my first point is section 12 2. I'm ignoring 12 1 because it's nothing. I will show you that 12 2 is applicable when you supply goods. So in case of supply of goods, where supplier is liable to pay the tax. Where supplier is liable to pay the tax. So I'm not discussing that case where recipient will be liable to pay the tax. So I'm not discussing the reverse charge mechanism situations. In this heading, I'm discussing when the payment of tax is on forward charge. Forward charge means whosoever is supplying, that person is liable to pay the tax to the government. But in this, we have two categories. Am I a supplier who is opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme? Supplier who is opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme. Or am I a supplier who is not opting? Who is not opting? Now, if I am a supplier who is opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme, then what is the time of supply? Time of supply is earlier of the following date, or you can say earliest of the following, first date. Sorry, date of issue of invoice, or you can say tax invoice, actual date of issue of tax invoice, or the date of issue of tax invoice as per section 31. And third, date of receiving payment. Now everything I'm looking from the eyes of the supplier. This person is the supplier. So all these 3 points are with the eyes of the supplier. Date of receiving the payment. Out of these 3 dates, whichever is earliest date, that becomes the time of supply, because government of India wants to make sure that time of supply is not delayed. So it should be at the earliest possible time so that the liability to pay arises and the supplier has to pay the tax without any delay. That is why it is using the word earliest and not later. So it is earliest. When invoice has been issued, liability to pay tax arises. Or even if you have actually issued the invoice later on, government says what is the date as per section 31. That 31 simply tells the last date by which invoice has to be issued or when you receive the payment. Out of these three, whichever is earliest, that becomes the time of supply. I will assume an example, but before that, there are some points to be considered. Note one. First, supply is deemed to have been made. Supply is deemed to have been made to the extent invoice is issued. To the extent tax invoice is issued. For example, I gave an advance rupees 2 lakh to any supplier to X Limited for purchasing some goods. X Limited issued the invoice. After some time, X Limited issued the invoice, issued the tax invoice of rupees 1 lakh 90. And the X Limited said that for the 10,000 product will be supplied to you later on. So in that case, do you know that the time of supply will be determined for the timing only for 1 lakh 90? For this 10,000, right now I cannot determine the time of supply. The time of supply, I don't know the date, but that will be for how much amount? It will be for rupees 1 lakh 90,000. Date is still pending. Date I don't know. Date I will check with an example. But I want to show you that the time of whatever time of supply will come, that will not be applicable for entire 2 lakh rupees. That will be applicable only on 1 lakh 90,000 because supply is deemed to have been made to the extent tax invoice is issued. If you are issuing the tax invoice of 1 lakh 90, then the concept will be applied only for 1 lakh 90. The date which you will get is the answer of 1 lakh 90,000 only. So whatever is the tax on 1 lakh 90,000, that date is the answer of that 1 lakh 90 is tax. That's it. For remaining 10,000, since invoice has not been issued, so we will see when the invoice will be issued later on. This is first note. Second note. When you say that the date of receiving payment, what is actually this date? What is actually this date? So what is this date of receiving payment? It is the date when the payment is entered in the books of account of the supplier or credited in the bank account of the supplier. What do you mean by date of receiving the payment? Date on which supplier receives the payment. What is this date? Now again, I am looking at the eyes of whom? Supplier. I am looking with the eyes of the supplier. So I am not looking with the eyes of the recipient, because in this case supplier is liable to pay tax. So what is the date on which supplier receives the payment? Earlier of, again, there can be two dates. Earlier of what? Date on which payment is entered in my books. For example, today I have received the check, but my accountant is very busy. He will deposit the check after 7 days. But today he has made the entry. So date on which payment is entered in the books of account of the supplier. Everything is happening from the supplier's eyes. Books of is in the books of account of the supplier. And another date is maybe I forgot to enter in the books of account, but I have deposited check and payment is credited in my bank. So the date on which payment is credited in bank account of the supplier. So earlier will be the date on which I received the payment. So these are 2 points which should be noted. And now let me assume a small example. X limited. A supplier opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme. A supplier opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme supplied rupees 1 lakh value of goods on 7th June 2020. It has received the advance money. It has received the entire advance of rupees 1,05,000 1,05,000 on 2nd June 2020. These goods are movable goods. An invoice was issued on 6th June 20. Is supplied. Okay. Now in this case, question says determine the place of supply. So not place of supply, time of supply. X Limited, a supplier opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme, supplied rupees 1 lakh value of goods on 7th June. So I supplied. Supplied means since these goods are movable goods, so I am assuming that these are removed for delivery, removed for dispatch, you can say. The point is, these are movable goods, so these are removed for dispatch. On 7th June, it has received the company has received, X Limited has received the entire advance of 1,05,000, but goods supplied are only 1 lakh rupees. That is also a point. On 2nd June 20, the goods are movable goods and invoice was issued on 6th June 20. Determine the time of supply. Now, how will I determine the time of supply? How will I proceed? First of all, I will check Section 12 is applicable, 13 or 14? 14 cannot be applicable because there is no change in rate. 13 cannot be applicable because it is not a service. So one thing is sure that section 12 is applicable. Within section 12, 2 is applicable because in 12 2, supplier is liable to pay the tax. In 12 2, supplier is liable to pay. Now within 12 2, there are two situations. Has I opted for composition or not? Answer is yes. I have opted for composition, so this is the answer. Now what is the time of supply? First point, what is the date of actual invoice? 6 June 20. This is first date, 6 June 2020. The date of actual invoice. Second, what is the last day by which invoice should have been issued? Now, do you remember section 31 subsection 1? In 31 subsection 1, it is clearly mentioned that when the goods are movable goods, then before or maximum at the time of removal of goods, invoice should have been issued. So, as per the provisions of the law, 7 June 20 is the last date. I have issued in fact before, so there is no problem. The last date by which invoice should have been issued under section 31 subsection 1. I hope you remember this 31 1. If not, then please revise. And third point, when the payment is received, 105 2nd June. So the payment is received on 2nd June. Now, which is early? 6 June is the answer, that's it. So, the time of supply is, in my example, 6, sorry, not 6, not 6, not 6. Earliest is 2nd June. Is time of supply 2nd June 2020. But do you know, not for 1 lakh rupees, not for 1 lakh 5,000, for 1 lakh rupees. Because supply is deemed to have been made to the extent invoice is issued. Since I have not yet supplied the product of 5,000, so I cannot say that time of supply has arisen. So it will be only for 1 lakh rupees. This was my first point of note. Till this point, is the question clear? Please raise your hand. Till this point, if the question is clear, please raise your hand. Numericals can also come for this time of supply. Okay, this is how they frame the numericals also. Great. So numerical is clear. Now the question is not yet over. Let me continue it. Now what is left is about this 5,000 for which I have received the amounts. So the point pending is what? For out of rupees 1 lakh 5,000 received, I have computed the time of supply for 1 lakh. What about the time of supply for remaining 5,000? What about the time of supply for remaining 5,000? This is one question in my mind. So for this, I need to tell you my third note. Earlier, I have told you only 2 notes, and now let me tell you the third note. Determination of time of supply. That is a part of section 12, section 2. Third note, determination of time of supply. When advance up to, but there is a limit up to 1,000 is received. In my case, though advance is more than 1,000, so that note will not be applicable, but you must know that what is this note. What happens if till 1,000 advance is received? Now I know that there are 3 dates. I know that there are three dates: date of receiving the payment, last date as per section 31, and the actual date. Out of this, the rule says check earliest one. The rule says check earliest one. This is what the rule is. But in so many circumstances, we pay small advance, 50 rupees advance. If we are in a regular business, then suppose the bill is of 900 rupees, I will say that okay, I have the note of 1000, keep 1000 and 100 is advance. Now for such advances, if you start applying this rule, then it will become very problematic for the businessmen. Anyone who has purchased a product of 50 rupees and the cost was 48 rupees, so by default 2 rupees have become advance. And when for this 2 rupees they have to apply the rule, then for 2 rupees actual invoice date is not there. In my example, if I say that 50 rupees product, 50 rupees advance received, and against this the product was of only 48 rupees and 2 rupees is excess advance, and if you apply this rule, what happens? For this 2 rupees there is no actual date, there is no last date, because still the supply has not happened, but receiving date will always be there. So for this 2 rupees of advance, always you will get the answer date of receipt, because other two will be by default missing. Since it is advance, we don't know the actual date, we don't know the last date, we do not know when the product will be actually supplied. So how can we compute point A and B? So it would have become very problematic that for every small amount of advance also, you start telling the answer as receiving date. That is why government says that if the advance is till 1000, government says that if the advance is till 1000, what this supplier can do, it is optional. It is optional for this supplier. What this supplier can do. What this supplier can do. Supplier can. What this supplier can do. He can determine the time of supply. Of this advance on the basis of issue of invoice, which of course, and this issue of invoice, which of course it will come in future, not right now. That's to unnecessarily increase the burden of suppliers. Government says, why to unnecessarily increase the burden of the suppliers? In case they receive the advance of till 1000, then let us not apply this date. They say no, don't apply this date. They say in that case, if supplier wants, of course, if supplier wants to pay the tax as per this provision, government says no issue, better you pay. If the supplier himself wants to pay tax as per this provision, even on the basis of advance, government says we have no objection to pay the tax. But still, if you want, you can wait till actual invoice is issued for this advance amount. This is what the point is. Like in my example, had it been only 1 lakh rather than 1 lakh 50, had it been only 1 lakh 200 rupees. So my this time of supply which I have determined was for 1 lakh, and for this 200, if I want, for this rupees 200, if I want, if supplier wants, then he can simply apply the rule of what? Date of issue of invoice. Which will come in future. I do not know right now because I have not yet supplied the product of this 200 advance. So this date will come later on if supplier wants. If supplier is not willing, if supplier does not want to take the benefit of this provision, government says no issue. मैं जब तुम खुद ही नहीं लेना चाहते तो अर्लीस्ट डेट लगा लो, हमें क्या प्रॉब्लम है? A date is date of invoice. B date is last date and date C is what? Receiving the amount. On which date amount is received? 2nd June. In case supplier doesn't want, government says no problem. 2nd June 2020 is the early. Pay the tax on this unit also if you want, we have no problem. But still government has given the freedom that till 1000 advance. We will wait till you issue the invoice. अगर invoice जिंदगी में कभी issue नहीं होगी तो government कहते हैं मेरे को tax चाहिए ही नहीं. This is what the point is. But what about the advances of more than 1000? Then government says no option is available. What about the advances of 1000, more 1000? For advance, this is exceeding 1000, then government says you have to apply this rule A, B, C. Date of invoice, then government says you don't have any option. So date of tax invoice, last date and date of payment. You have to apply the rule. That's it. In this case, answer will by default come date of payment. Because as the name suggests, advances. That means against this exceeding 1000 advance, you have not yet made any supply. So by default, date of payment will become early. That's it. With this, I have completed the concept of composition levy scheme. In case supplier is liable to pay the tax, any problem, please ask. Otherwise, raise your hand. If you have understood the concept of that advance point. Please raise your hand if you have understood the concept of determining the place of supply. When supplier is liable to pay the tax and the supplier is willing to pay the tax as per composition levy scheme. 3 dates are given: last date, actual date, receiving date. It will apply by default. In case of advance till 1000, government says don't apply these 3 dates. We will wait till you actually issue the invoice. That will become point of supply. In case it is more, in case the advance is more than 1000, then government also says you don't have any option. You have to apply these 3 dates. Now please raise your hand if the concept is clear. Then I will proceed to the concept of non-composition levy suppliers. Please raise your hand if the concept is clear. Okay, now next part of the same section. Next part, same section. Now this part. Same section. Who is not opting? Now in this case, what happens is that you don't have this option, date of issue. No, you have only these first two. That's it. Otherwise, everything is same. So the time of supply in this case is 1 point. Date of issue and second point, the day as per section 31. That's it. Advance is not at all there. So this is the only point. I hope you can easily determine this case also. If any example comes, then in that case, you have to give the answer on the basis of these points. This note 1 is as it is applicable. Supply is deemed to have been made to the extent tax invoice is issued. This is applicable. Second note is by default inapplicable because we are not at all concerned when the payment is received. Similarly, third note is by default inapplicable because advance, ignore 1000 advance. In fact, even if you have received 1000 crore advance, still advance is of no relevance. As we can see, only these 2 dates are the answer. So why I will check the advance if does not exceed 1000. Even if you have received the advance exceeding 1000, still it does not make any sense. Answer is flat. Date of invoice or the date under section 31. Let me assume an example. Then you will understand probably. opted by the supplier. If it is not opted by the supplier, then what happens? X Limited supplied goods 2 lakh on 21st September 2020 and issued the invoice late on 24th September 20. Advance is received. Entire amount of advance of 2 lakh was received, in fact, 6 months ago. You can say on 20th April 20. Government this excluded supplied goods. This was the example. Excluded supplied goods of 2 lakh on 21st September 20 and issued the invoice on 24th. The goods were removed on 21st itself, though in reality it will not happen. But I want to show that my purpose is to discuss with you time of supply. Goods were removed on 21st September. In reality it will not happen because without removal, without tax invoice, you cannot remove the goods. Otherwise, any time penalty etc. will be applicable. But still, I am assuming. Now, can you tell me determination of place of supply? Determination of time of supply, not place. Assuming that X Limited not opting for composition liability, not opting. In this case, what is the time of supply? Solution. Only 2 dates. Receiving payment doesn't matter. First date. Actual date, which is 24th September 20. And what is the last date? The last date is before removing 21st September 20. So what is the answer? Earliest 21st September 20. This is the answer. Advance date was in fact earlier than both these dates, but still that is not relevant. Government said no, advance is not considered when you have not opted to pay tax under composition levy scheme. With this, if you have any problem, you ask me. Otherwise, the concepts are clear. Raise your hand. I'll discuss with you 12.2. Okay, now I would like to show you one interesting thing. Reading of act is also not a complete knowledge. If you are simply referring to acts, you cannot say that you are supreme or having highest knowledge. No. Why? Now let me show you section 12.2 and I will show you why. Now this is my section 12.2 and see what it says. This is the real, exact, original knowledge. So let me start reading section 12. Time of supply of goods. The liability to pay tax on goods shall arise at the time of supply as determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. So why I have not discussed with you 12.1? Because that was a conceptual section. It was only telling me the concept that liability to pay tax will arise at the time of supply. That's it. That is the concept. The time of supply will help me in determining the exact date on which you have become liable to pay the tax. I hope the act is visible. It is necessary that act is visible. Now subsection 2. Now carefully you see this. See the language. The time of supply of goods shall be the earlier of the following dates, namely clause A. The date of issue of invoice by the supplier or the last date on which he is required under section 31 to issue the invoice with respect to the supply. Both these points I have covered. Clause B also have covered the date on which the supplier receives the payment with respect to the supply. That 1000 point also I have covered here. Provided that where the supplier of taxable goods receives an amount up to rupees 1000 in excess of the amount indicated in the invoice, the time of supply to the extent of such excess amount shall, at the option of the supplier, be the date of issue of invoice in respect of such excess amount. That also I have discussed. Explanation 1 and 2. That also I have discussed. What is explanation 1? That supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent covered by the invoice. What is explanation 2? The date on which supplier receives the payment shall be the date on which the payment is entered in his books of account or the date on which payment is credited to his bank account. That also I have covered. Now can you tell me what I have told you extra? Now then I will tell you that why you cannot trust the act only without reading other things. Can you tell me what I have told you extra, which you are not finding in the act? What I have told you extra which you have not found in the act? Any answer? The answer is composition point. I have told you section 12 subsection 2 with respect to two different categories. A person who has opted for composition, person who is not opting. Have you found this composition concept written in the act? Please raise your hand. Have you found? If your answer is no, you have not found, please raise your hand. If you also think that yes, you have not found that word composition, please raise your hand. But still I am telling you that point. On what basis I am telling you this one? This is the question. If you have understood that why I am explaining this composition, please raise your hand. Have you understood my question? That composition which I have explained, that concept is not at all written in the act, then why I am telling you? Please raise your hand if you have understood the question. If you have understood my concern, please raise your hand. The answer lies in the notification. There is a notification on this section which tells you this point about composition. I will show you this notification. But again, when a question arises, why there can be notification? Because in the entire section, nowhere the word notification was used. So on what basis the notification has been issued? You cannot issue the notification until unless Parliament gives you the power. How the Parliament gives you the power? Through the Act. If you carefully see, nowhere the word mentioned that government can notify. Still notification has been issued. Why? Have you understood my another question? That when notification is not mentioned in the Act, section 12, subsection 2, on what basis notification has been issued? Have you understood this question also? Please raise your hand. I am telling you the answer that notification has been issued, but the question which I am raising is why notification has been issued when section 12 subsection 2 is not authorized to issue the notification. Okay, now first let me show you that notification. I hope this site is visible. This is the website of CBIC. This is the website of CBIC. GST. Notifications, central tax. This was a notification number 90 issued in 2017 and carefully see the language. 1990 was earlier one, 66. See this notification carefully. I hope this notification is visible. Please raise your hand if this notification is visible. Okay, now see the language carefully. This notification is issued under section 148. 148 has been given the power to issue notification in case of removing any difficulty. In excess, now you can see this line. In exercise of the powers conferred by section 148 of the Central Goods and Services Tax Act, 148, not 12 to 148. Because when you read section 148, you will find that under section 148, any notification can be issued under any section which government thinks is beneficial and it will help in removing any ambiguity or difficulty. So 148 is the residuary section to issue such notifications. And I'm not reading other lines, start reading from this point. The central government, on the recommendations of the council, hereby notifies the registered person who did not opt for composition levy, as the class of persons who shall pay the central tax on the outward supply of goods at the time of supply as specified in clause A of subsection 2 of section 12. That's it. Now come back to my that point. So what this notification is saying, it says that any person who is not opting for composition levy scheme, time of supply will be determined as per section 12 subsection 2 clause A. Clause B is by default removed in that notification, because notification clearly says that any person who is not opting to pay tax under composition levy scheme, that person has to determine time of supply as per section 12 to A. That is why payment, even if received advance, even if 1 rupees or 1000 crore rupees, in case you are not covered under composition levy scheme, no need to determine the time of supply on the advance only till you actually make a supply. That's it. This is what I wanted to show you, that why reading of act is also incomplete till you refer all the notifications to be an expert in any area. Please raise your hand if the concept is clear. So that's great, and I think we should wind up this session, and tomorrow I will wind up entire section 12, and if time permits I will start section 13 also. So 12.2 was lengthy portion, remaining subsections are very easy. Goodbye for now.